Hey, what's going on, family? Today we're going to talk about this article right here from Protos. Richard Hart claims that the SEC, that the lawsuit that they have against him infringes on his free speech. It seems like that's the new buzzword of today's time. It's just free speech. Everyone thinks that you could go around, say what you want to say without no repercussions, without no consequences. Yeah, you do have the right to say what you want to say, but then the people who are hearing what you're saying have the right to react the way they want to. So the things that you say definitely has impact. You just can't go out and say what you want to say without thinking that you can't be touched. And when you do get touched, then that's when that free speech begins to be thrown all around the place. So now Richard is talking about free speech once the SEC dropped this lawsuit on him. So now we got to talk about free speech. Let's go through this article. Hex founder Richard Hart has finally filed his motion to dismiss in the Eastern District of New York. Hart has been preparing to write the document, probably the most important he has ever written, for years. And here's the document right there. 69 pages. The filing requests the U.S. District Court Judge Carol Bagley Amon to toss out the Securities and Exchange Commission lawsuit against him and his three crypto projects, Hex, PulseChain, and PulseX. Yeah, this man's really trying to harness a whole lot of vehicles to ensure that he continues to keep his pockets fat. Hart, real name Richard Schuler, founded Hex, which currently sits 98% down from all-time highs. If that don't speak to you, I don't know what will. If your project was really viable, if it was something that people really wanted to hold on to, it would not be down 98%. How does that go for free speech? We can actually see from the history of the project that people are speaking that they don't value Hex. It's 98% down. Why is it 98% down? Answer that question. Oh, because people are throwing shade on Richard's name, right? I get it. That's probably what it is. Or just people aren't using Hex and promoting Hex. And it's also behind blockchain token PLS and exchange token PLSX. These are both also trading far below their all-time highs. The SEC claims that Hart sold all three tokens to investors in unregistered securities transactions and raised over $1 billion in violation of U.S. law. $1 billion. Richard Hart, if he raised $1 billion, either he is a great marketer or people simply wanted to get rich quick. Because there's no way that you can raise $1 billion in your three projects and the market is still down. To protect U.S. residents from further harm and fraud, commissioners have requested disgorgement of ill-gotten revenue, accumulated interest, fines, and permanent injunctions. They're trying to keep him at bay and say, look, Richard, you're doing too much damage to U.S. residents. You're taking all of their money and they're not getting nothing in return. They're giving you all this money in hopes of a return. That's why people usually put money in these contracts, in these investment vehicles, in these assets. They're looking for a return themselves. But they're just filling the pockets of Richard Hart, right? A motion to dismiss is a defendant's first formal argument to a judge on why a lawsuit should be terminated. The document usually argues that the plaintiff has failed to adequately allege jurisdiction, grounds, and other matters of fact and law. In his motion to dismiss, filed by his lawyers at Quinn Emanuel, Hart claims that he resided abroad and didn't aim any securities offerings at U.S. investors. So that's that jurisdiction that he's trying to get the judge to dismiss, saying that he's not under the jurisdiction of the SEC because, for one, he didn't live under the jurisdiction of the SEC, which is within the United States. And then two, he didn't offer any of the securities to U.S. investors. Now, how can you prove that though? Did he specifically say these 3 projects that I have, Hex, PulseX, and the other one, PulseChain, these are not for U.S. investors? Did he specifically say that? Because if so, then all he needs to do is play the video playback of where he said it. He also claims that neither of his 3 tokens created any investment contract. That's going to be hard to prove in court. Finally, he says that his speech and crypto activities are protected by the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Now, again, you have to pick where you're going to pick your battle, where you're going to fight. You cannot say that his speech and his crypto activities are protected by the First Amendment of the United States. You can't say that because that falls under the jurisdiction of the United States. The SEC, they are under the United States, the Constitution. But then goes on to say that he resided abroad. So did you live outside of the United States, the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, or were you there? That's how you can tell people are just simply trying to throw something to hopefully maybe one of them will stick on the wall. You can't have both. Either you're under the jurisdiction of the United States, under the First Amendment, under the U.S. Constitution, or you're not. Which one is it? So that alone could also dismiss this motion to dismiss that he's trying to get. The judge can knock that down just by that alone. That confirms if he says that his speech and his crypto activities are protected, then that you're literally telling the court that you're under their jurisdiction then. All of these claims in Hex, PulseChain, and PulseX founder's opinion mean that the SEC has insufficient jurisdiction and grounds to sue. 11 of my lawyers are fighting for your rights. He sounds like Trump. No, you're fighting for your rights. You're the one that's being sued by the SEC. They just filed this motion to dismiss with the SEC. The fact pattern here seems superior to the fact patterns of other cases you see in courts, and as such, it's a wonderful place to stand. All right. So go over here to the lawsuit, his motion to dismiss, which is right here. And I wanted to show you right here. The complaint unconstitutionally infringes on the First Amendment rights of Mr. Hart and thousands of Hex, PulseChain, and PulseX participants. Unable to cite or allege dissemination of the sorts of offering materials or communications typically associated with security contracts, the SEC seeks in effect to punish Mr. Hart for his public speech. Unable to cite or allege dissemination of the sorts. Are there videos out to where Hart is promoting these 3 projects? That is dissemination. Maybe that will come out during the trial of where the SEC is going to provide where Hart is disseminated this information, trying to get people to buy these 3 projects. So without that information, without those promotions, without those video clips, his attorneys are saying that they're trying to punish, talking about the SEC is trying to punish Hart, which is a violation of his rights and free expression under the First Amendment. So you just can't go out and say what you want to say though, and think that you have free expression. Oh yeah, you got it. You got the free expression to express what you want to say, but then you can't get upset when someone comes and sue you about it, right? It also threatens to trample over the rights of thousands of individuals who express themselves through software programs at issue. How do you express yourself through software programs? How do you do that? Is it when you go in and actually purchase the instrument? Are you expressing yourself then with the hopes of getting paid, making more money than what you actually put in? How do you prove that? The complaints relies on Mr. Hart's speech as a basis for penalizing him unconstitutionally infringing on his First Amendment rights. The complainant's allegations and the underlying theory of the SEC case hinge on Mr. Hart's statements. So, again, this is very contradictory. I don't even think that's a word, but you guys get what I'm saying. At one section, you're saying that they're unable to cite or allege dissemination of the source of offering materials or communications, right? You're saying that he's not doing it in that particular paragraph, but then immediately in section A, you'd say that the SEC case hinges on Richard's statements describing the HEX, PulseChain, and PulseX software, explaining how the programs worked and how participants could execute the software programs, and offering his opinions about whether the software programs will be successful and the token's value. Again, in order to induce people to come and give money, you usually got to show a benefit. Now, it's one thing if none of the content that Richard has created with these 3 projects talked about them making money, talk about the value of the tokens, and he just merely talked about how the programs worked, how people could execute the programs. That was it. If that was all he did for the duration of these 3 projects, then maybe they have a leg to stand on. But then they talk about the attorneys, his opinions, right there, about whether the software programs will be successful and the tokens valuable. That right there is what is getting Richard caught up. Did he talk about that? Of the 58 paragraphs in the factual allegations of the complaint, 32 mention statements by Mr. Hart. It gives you all of the citations there from the SEC complaint. According to the SEC, this speech, what Mr. Hart said, not what he did, transformed the HEX, PulseChain, and PulseX software programs into investment contracts. Do you see anything wrong with that? People can act on what you say. That's called promotion. It's called word of mouth advertising. That's probably one of the freest, most impactful way to market is by word of mouth. Open your mouth and talk about it. Not necessarily what you did. Now, what he did do was actually create these 3 projects. And why did he create it? Answer that question. Why did Richard create these 3 projects? Is it because he wanted to offer a free program for everybody to use? Or did he promote these 3 projects in hopes of making his pockets fat and not everyone else? Because that's why these projects are down massively from highs. The SEC all but concedes that its enforcement action is premised on Mr. Hart's speech, including overtly political speech that enjoys robust protection under the First Amendment. See, now they're diverting off of what's at stake in this lawsuit. We're talking about Richard Hart selling investment contracts, securities. Did he do that? They're going on into free speech, and then it goes into political speech. Hart frequently claimed that an investment in PulseChain was linked to free speech. That you believe free speech is a protected human right and blockchains are speech, and you're sacrificing to prove that, to prove you believe that. Wow. It's funny how people try to transform simple things. How did PulseChain turn into free speech? Because you bought the coin? And that blockchains are speech? Are you serious? I thought it was just an intangible ledger that keeps track of all the transactions that occur. A public blockchain. But now Richard is trying to link it to free speech. How is that sway? How sway? That you believe, now look at that quote, that you believe free speech. Now, if the blockchain is free, Why did he make y'all pay for it? Why did he make people come in and pay and get some of these tokens? If it's free, he should have just distributed all the tokens then from all three projects. Here you go, guys. It's all free. But when the case flips and the light gets shined back on him, now we're talking about, oh, PulseChain, PulseX, Hex is free. It's protected. It's a blockchain of speech. Bulldozing right past the free speech implications of Mr. Hart's statements about the nature of PulseChain and PulseX sacrifices. Sacrifices simply means that I put something in with the hopes of getting something in return. It's a sacrifice because I can't get that back. I could use that somewhere else, but I sacrificed this money to give it to these three projects in hopes of a return. The SEC plucks a handful of Mr. Hart's statements from among ours. This is where the lawsuit kind of breaks apart, in my opinion. The SEC plucks a handful. You don't need hours upon hours of proof. You don't, to show that what you were saying, the things that you did, were instilling people to think that they were actually investing in investment contracts. That's all you need is a handful. It doesn't matter that Richard talks hours upon hours and presents them out of context, ignoring the broader aims of Mr. Hart's statements and dismissing a tongue-in-cheek. Mr. Hart repeated disclaimers about the status of his offerings under security laws. Did he say that? Disclaimers? So I'm not going to go through this whole thing. Just go to this article right here from Protos, and you guys would see, click on this area here, on this filing right here, and it'll take you to this PDF. Okay. But just make it make sense. It doesn't make any sense as to how he's trying to place free speech under this lawsuit to dismiss that the SEC has against him. It just doesn't make any sense. Maybe some of the other reasons as to why you want to have this case dismissed makes sense, but outside of the free speech, I don't see the free speech actually make it to the court dismiss that, but we'll see. Give me your thoughts. Make sure you maintain the profitability, and as always, trade different.